I'm from Tufts University, and I have some wonderful collaborators from Georgetown University and University of Maryland. So as a little bit of background, almost all social media and microblogging sites support account verification. And verified accounts can be identified with an indicator after the account name. Below are some indicators from Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Snapchat. Verification has historically been reserved for notable individuals, which includes celebrities, journalists, government institutions, and other people or organizations of interest. And these people were authenticated using government ID. Verification is meant to authenticate the user's identity, and it does not endorse validity or opinions of posted content. So verified doesn't necessarily mean a post is true, but do users know this? Prior work shows the answer is mostly yes. Controlled experiments have shown that users correctly understand that the verified indicator only confers authenticity and not credibility. So in this historical view of account verification, people were correctly separating authenticity from credibility. Unfortunately, account verification has changed considerably, and it all began with this tweet. Twitter's current lords and peasants system for who has or doesn't have a blue check mark is bullshit. Power to the people, blue for only $8 a month. Twitter decided anyone with a phone number could be verified, and for only $8 a month, you don't even have to show us your ID. But of course, we can't just criticize Twitter. Meta took the opportunity to quietly roll out a very similar paid verification change. Meta, which encompasses Facebook and Instagram, also opened verification to all users starting at just $11.99 a month. However, Meta continued to require government ID authentication. And this was followed by LinkedIn and other platforms opening verification to everyone with a government ID. So the dawn of Twitter Blue was not really a single change, but the beginning of a major shift in the whole landscape of account verification. And the shift also came with some high-profile examples of imposters with verification badges. Here we have two tweets, both claiming to be the Chiquita Banana Corporation. The tweet on the left claims they have just overthrown the government of Brazil. And the tweet on the right states that there's been a misleading message from a fake Chiquita account. They haven't actually overthrown a government since 1954. Both of these accounts are imposters, thankfully. But previously, a user could see this verification badge and know for sure that this is the Chiquita Corporation. And then they could use that knowledge of authenticity to make their own judgment of validity. But users can no longer trust the verification badge actually confers authenticity as it used to. So in summary, we can't assume that previously observed perceptions of verified accounts are still valid. We had the following research questions for this study. First, what are the verification policies used by popular social media platforms, and how have they changed over time? Second, what do users think account verification entails, and how does it impact perceptions of posted content credibility? And finally, how would potential changes to verification policies impact user perceptions of posts from verified accounts and user perceptions of those policies? For brevity, I'll only discuss the results from research questions 2 and 3, and I'll only discuss them in the context of Facebook and Twitter. To test research questions 2 and 3, we created an online survey outlined here. I'll first talk about the implicit and explicit measures of credibility. So to answer our question about how participants perceive the verified indicator, we began by asking them which of the two posts they think is correct. Posts were formatted to look either like Twitter or like Facebook, and this example shows a format of Twitter. One post declares a risk exists, the other contradicts the claim of that risk. So in this particular post, one claims there is a bomb threat, the other says that the threat does not exist. And this is what we call the police content. So the verified indicator was randomly placed next to either the left or right post, and then we asked the participant which post they believe is correct on a 5-point Likert scale. As I mentioned, posts were formatted to look like either Facebook or Twitter. Participants were randomly assigned to one format. And prior work shows that content has a major effect on perceived credibility. So we had a second set of content that we called the coffee condition, which regarded an alleged link between coffee consumption and disease. Participants were then primed to consider that one of the posts they had just seen had the verification checkmark, And we then asked them what the requirements were to be verified, either on Twitter or on Facebook, depending on the post that they were shown. Next, to answer our second research question, to understand how participants would respond to changes in the verification policy, we then showed the participant a mock verification policy like the one outlined in red here. In this example, they're shown a policy that is open to all, requires a government ID, and requires payment. We then asked the participant how acceptable the policy is and what they would like to change about the policy. In total, there were 8 different policies a participant could have seen. These varied along 3 dimensions. The first dimension was eligibility. Who is eligible to be verified? This was either notable, meaning verification is restricted to persons of interest only, or open, meaning anyone can be verified. Next was verification method. This was either government ID, meaning the user must prove their identity with government issue ID, or phone/email, meaning the user must verify their phone number or their email address only. And finally, the policy was either paid, meaning they must pay a monthly fee to maintain their verified status, or meaning no payment is required. So participants were once more asked which post was correct, assuming the presented policy was used for verification, which measured whether the presented policy affected perceived credibility. Now I'll discuss results of research question 2. What do users think account verification entails, and how does it impact perceived credibility? But first I should explain what Twitter's and Facebook's policies are so we know the ground truth. Along the axis of eligibility, both platforms had open eligibility. For verification method, Twitter only required a phone number, Facebook required government ID, and both platforms were paid. The chart shows the number of participants who mentioned a particular dimension of verification when it asked for the definition. The blue bar represents participants who saw Twitter, and the red represents those who saw Facebook posts. Overall, participants were less aware of Facebook's policy changes. So Facebook-assigned participants were more likely to believe verification was still for notable accounts only, and they were also less likely to report that Facebook verification was open to all users. Participants also incorrectly believed Facebook verification was still free. As you can see here, payments was primarily associated with Twitter. However, participants were more likely to believe Facebook confirms user identity. And this is correct. Facebook does require government ID for verification, though unlike the misconceptions about eligibility and payment, this was not a policy change. And now turning to credibility perceptions. This chart shows what percentage of participants found which account more credible. Green bars represent participants who found the verified account more credible. Orange bars represent participants who found the non-verified account more credible. And we divide participants by the platform and the content shown. The most important takeaway is that we did not see a difference in perceived credibility based on the platform shown. You can see the upper 4 bars representing Twitter, and lower 4 bars representing Facebook do not have significant differences. Twitter and Facebook, however, have very different verification policies, so ideally participants would perceive credibility of verified accounts differently based on the platform. Nevertheless, we didn't see that in the results. And now I'll highlight some findings from how potential policy changes could impact user perceptions. This chart similarly shows what percentage of participants found which account credible, though now we divide by the policy shown instead of the content shown. Bars marked celeb were for notable policies only, and bars labeled government ID are for government ID authenticated policies. The first key finding was that limiting verification to notable accounts only and authenticating with a government ID increased posted content credibility. If you compare each government ID and phone pair, the government ID bar generally has a higher preference towards the verified account. If you compare the open and celeb pairs of bars, celeb generally has a higher preference towards the verified account. We also saw payment did not affect perceived credibility. Again, you can see the upper 4 bars representing paid policies and the lower 4 bars representing free policies have little difference. Now I'll discuss how acceptable our participants found each policy. The green bars represent an acceptable policy, orange bars an unacceptable policy. We have a couple key takeaways. First, limiting verification to notable accounts only increased policy acceptability. You can see that the policies that were for notable only, outlined in blue, are slightly more acceptable than those marked open. We also found authenticating with government ID increased acceptability. Comparing each GovID bar with a neighboring phone bar, we can see that government ID is a more acceptable policy. We also saw payment reduced approval, which is what we expected. It's very clear that the 4 paid policies are dramatically less acceptable than free. So in conclusion, people seemed aware that Twitter moved to an open paid policy, but they were unaware that Facebook did the same. And this is a problem considering participants generally interpreted the verified indicator the same regardless of platform. And in fact, we saw no difference in the verified indicator's effects between platforms. But we did see more Facebook participants reported being unaware of Facebook's policy. So it's possible that people are just defaulting to an understanding of verification based off Twitter. We also saw our participants preferred government ID authenticated and free policies. So from this finding, we make a couple of recommendations. First, we recommend platforms require government ID checks to improve trust and verification. We saw that government ID checks were generally more acceptable and increased perceived credibility of verified accounts. We did see a mixed response to eligibility preference. From open response questions, participants reported preferring open eligibility, but from regression analysis, participants seemed to prefer notable-only policies. And one possible solution to this may be tiered verification, which is similar to Twitter's different government and business account badges. So expanding this to other platforms may prove beneficial. Thank you everyone for attending, and I look forward to any questions you have.